All right, gentlemen, as always, we begin with our quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick up the conversation from there. Did the Middle East get safer or more volatile in 2025? Mr. Fitton-Brown, please take the lead.
Thank you. Well, I think it probably got more volatile in the short term, but I think it's potentially got safer in the longer term. I think by far the most important thing that happened in 2025 was the Iran-Israel conflict, the 12-day war, as Donald Trump called it, which has transformed the relationship between the West and Iran and has put Iran in a situation where things that it would previously do with no consequences whatsoever, like pursuing a nuclear program, it can no longer do.
And if I may, perhaps more poetically, as we dub it here in Israel, rising lion, paraphrasing the previous administration of the Shah, but we will get to further into that later on in the program. Mr. Melman, your thoughts?
Well, I think the Middle East is now more stable strategically and even tactically. There are still a lot of challenges, but there are some. The future is very promising because of the last 2 years of the conflict in Gaza, Iran, and in Syria. So I'm optimistic about the future.
All right, that's a good start. Last but not least, Ariel Asser, on your take.
Well, I think the region is now in a position, in a status of strategic reassessment as it realigns, trying to kind of gauge this new reality that we're in. I will say that many dormant undercurrents that so far weren't in the forefront, like a direct clash between Israel and Iran, growing tensions between Israel and Turkey. I think this is something that is going to carry us into the next year. But as a whole, I think the region is currently in a process of strategic reassessment. And so that inherently has less volatility and more stability depending on the outcome of this reassessment and realignment.
All right, gentlemen, from this point onwards, please feel free to interact with one another. But I do want us to begin with the latest, albeit we're trying to summarize the year, because if any at all, it was the year of al-Sharaa. We've seen the fall of Assad, the rise of al-Sharaa, and we are compelled to ask the question. The transition has been completed, but Ariel Asser, is it a Taliban with the Mediterranean coast, or should we believe the rebranding?
Well, look, Syria is in a very challenging process of nation building in terms of the international community providing all the conditions Syria needs in order to embark on that in the most successful way. It achieved that, but ultimately we've seen numerous times throughout the year that there have been these sectarian tensions, clashes between various groups and the government, as well as, you can say, elements outside the government that have been taking advantage of the chaos. So there is an ongoing chaos. We got a great example, or not a great example, but another example today in the deadly clashes in Latakia between government forces on the Syrian coast, and the pro-government are saying that this was former Assadists that instigated the crowd. But ultimately you have the lingering challenge of foreign fighters and of elements that are operating outside the law. Now, the latter is being tackled by the government, but the armed forces have in their midst foreign fighters, and that is a destabilizing element moving forward.
But it's not merely the issue of Syria. It is perhaps a demonstration of the regional realignment, so to speak. And in this respect, we cannot not mention Turkey and its neo-Ottoman aspiration, so to speak. Mr. Fitton-Brown, do you think Syria is the first but not the last, perhaps, territory in which Erdogan will try to make his point?
No, I think you're certainly right about that. I think Erdogan he's an opportunist and he'll make his point anywhere that he can. And terrific opportunity has arisen for him in Syria. I do agree with exactly what Ariel was saying earlier about the complexities of Syria. I can't help feeling that we are better off having got rid of the Assad regime, but we're left with something that is very volatile indeed. And of course, you've got important stakeholders from outside, like Turkey, as you say, and of course, Israel is a stakeholder there as well. I think one of the key questions is, will Turkey allow al-Sharaa to be a leader for the Syrian people, or are they trying to use him as a cat's paw both to threaten Israel, but also to crush the Kurdish aspirations?
So in this respect, Mr. Melman, I will be more blunt about it. Is the neo-Ottoman regional order Erdogan is seeking to establish, does it match the Turkish power or Erdogan's ambitions?
Well, we have been talking and dealing with Erdogan about his Ottoman aspirations for a regional hegemony for the last at least decade. And so far, I don't think he has achieved it. He has been challenged by Israel in Syria, and in the last few days in the south, in the Red Sea, in Somaliland and Somalia.
Right.
And therefore, and Israel is, one shouldn't forget that actually Israel is still on Syrian territory,
right.
not just on the Israeli Golan Heights and on the buffer zone. So al-Sharaa is basically trapped between probably his own dreams and aspirations to lead Syria for a new on a new path and a new future, and between Erdogan's maybe secret and no so secret aspirations. But for the time being, I think he is not achieving his aims.
All right, well, we'll let politics dictate our route, not necessarily geography. And we cannot not address the campaign in Iran. And my question to you, Mr. Fitton-Brown, is, was the lesson, at the bottom line of it, was stay away from the pursuit of nuclear power, or the exact opposite? You are far better off while having nuclear powers.
Well, I think, some people have tried to make that second argument, but those people are people who were against the Israeli intervention, against the US intervention. I think the reality of what we've seen from Iran over the past, frankly, 45 years is that they will push as far as they're allowed to push. And, people were not drawing a firm line. Now, once or twice that had changed. At one point, US Treasury sanctions had really forced the Iranians into a reassessment. Most of the time, they get away with what they do, both pursuing nuclear ambitions and also waging asymmetric warfare against their neighbors and against the Arab states, and of course against Israel. And so I think that what we've finally seen is Iran realizing that it can no longer do these things without cost. And I think that is a very important positive step.
So in this respect, Ariel Osseron, is Tehran finished, or is it just, regrouping? Is the deterrence restored, or just waiting?
Look, Ellie, I think in a post-October 7th reality, the word deterrence is a very fickle term. Ultimately, I think this is, as the ambassador just said, this is the first time in the Islamic Republic's history that it received such a powerful countering from an external party. Not only direct blows on Iranian soil against its nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities, but also its proxy program that it has invested tens of billions of dollars for some decades. The vision of Qasem Soleimani was severely battered, and so now they're in a position of regrouping. They are showing no signs of letting go of that strategy, and so I think the stage is being set for round two, which is likely to be a lot more violent because the Iranians don't want round two to be the last round, whereas that is exactly what Israel's hoping for.
Yeah, Supreme Leader Khamenei even said so himself. You cannot stand this not war, not peace situation. It's either or, no in between. Mr. Melman, your thoughts?
Well, around 25 years ago, I met with I talked with the Deputy Director General of IAEA, Oli Oinanen, and I asked him about, and he was an expert on the Iranian nuclear program and visited Tehran many times. And I asked him, what is the Iranian grand strategy? And he told me they don't have a grand strategy. They are taking it step by step. If they are stopped, they would retreat. And I think what we have seen in the last few years is exactly that picture. Iran is aspiring to be a threshold nuclear state, but they never dare to cross this threshold. And therefore, they would continue with the same policy, with the same doctrine. However, they were stopped by the Israeli and the United States blows. Yeah. And now they are reassessing how to proceed regarding the nuclear program and how to respond for the Israeli supremacy and the United States support of Israeli supremacy.
Yeah, so not the last round for certain. Gentlemen, let's pivot now to the one who stays on the fence, so to speak. We are officially closer now to 2030 than we were yesterday. Ambassador Fitton-Brown, in this respect, Saudi Arabia, so it seems, just wants to be left alone to do its business. Saudi got everything without normalization. Is it the biggest winner?
Well, I think in a way you're right, it is. That's partly, I think, because for reasons I don't fully understand, the US administration has not really put much pressure on Saudi Arabia to deliver its share of a bargain here. So Saudi Arabia is able to sort of sit back and not commit absolutely to supporting US objectives, not commit to the Abraham Accords.
So not necessarily a Saudi success, but more so perhaps an American failure?
Well, I think let's say that I think we've already talked about the theme of unfinished business. I think this is also unfinished business.
Right. Ariel?
Look, I think the potential axis that Israel wants to engage with, and that is the moderate Sunni countries led by Saudi Arabia, they're currently baffled. They don't understand Israel's current posturing in the region. They see Israel acting in a thuggish manner. Even friends like in the UAE, Emiratis have been telling us in private conversations that as long as Israel continues to strike every country on its borders, they simply cannot engage publicly with Israel. And the Saudis have taken it a step further. They're saying that under this current government, this has been said by elements close to the Saudi royal court on this channel, have said that under this current government, there will be no normalization. So they want to see the region a little more stable, Israel acting in a more, in their eyes, responsible and toned down manner, whether that indeed is aligned with their own interests, let alone Israel's interests. That is not entirely certain, but ultimately they fear engaging with Israel publicly in this current reality where Israel is much more on the offensive in terms of its defense doctrine.
As long as they can before they put their weight in the game. And in this respect, Mr. Melman, Qatar, after a year of hosting Hamas on the one hand and mediating ceasefires on the other, and then funding Gaza reconstruction yet again, we are still asking this revolving question: is Qatar the solution, or is Qatar the problem?
Qatar is the problem, and it's inherited in their ideology, as we see it in the West. I remember during the Syrian civil war, when Qatar supported al-Nusra, led by Mr. Giuliani, Ahmed al-Sharaa, now the president of Syria. And they kidnapped some international peacekeeping forces. And on the other hand, they paid money to Nusra to release them. So it's always this kind of a policy. They walk their tightrope of being balancing between terrorist organizations, extreme ideology, and trying to appease the West. Nothing has changed, and we have seen it in the way they are dealing with Hamas and Gaza. On one hand, they gave money to Gaza, support Hamas, and on the other hand, they are trying to mediate between and release the Israeli hostages. Qatar is a problem, and it is not being solved, and it will not as long as they are having a American huge base and the United States depend on them.
Yes, Ambassador Fitton-Brown, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with that. I agree that Qatar is the problem. It's not the solution. It's not the solution to anything, and it never has been. What it does is it makes itself useful to lazy Western countries who can't be bothered to understand the intricacies of some of the conflicts that they're trying to deal with. And so they then sort of, Qatar comes along and says, well, we can help you with this.
Yeah,
we can provide
with the problem I created, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly so. You know, they didn't do us any good in Afghanistan. They didn't do us any good in Lebanon. They didn't do us any good in Yemen either. Qatar means Israel harm, and it means the West harm. And unfortunately, it's been very clever about how it has bought influence throughout the Western world.
Well, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on we know who. Gentlemen, as we are nearing the end of our conversation, predictions or subtle observations ahead of 2026. New order or same problems, just different faces? Ariel.
I think we're going to carry into the next year a lot of these challenges that we've outlined throughout this past half hour, mainly in Syria. I think there's a big question mark regarding Lebanon. Is Israel going to escalate its attacks on Hezbollah, given that the Lebanese army, while there's a will, there isn't necessarily a way for them to completely disarm it? Many questions moving forward with regards to Hamas. I will just note on the previous topic of Qatar, I also agree that Qatar is part of the problem. They will continue with their delegitimization campaign against Israel, so the so-called Eighth Front, which is perhaps the most active of all of Israel's fronts in this multi-front war. However, over this past year, they joined they became the sole member of a disrespectful club of being the only country to have been struck by also Iran and Israel. So this will also be a test to whether they got the message. Spoiler alert, they didn't.
Well, maybe even Qatar itself would agree that it is a problem stirrer and not necessarily a problem solver. Ambassador Fitton-Brown, briefly, if you will, your prediction to 2026.
Well, I mean, coming back to that point about unfinished business, I think we have unfinished business, and you know, you're confronting it in Lebanon. Clearly, the Lebanese and Hezbollah have not quite got the message yet, and there will be a need for further Israeli action there. We're confronting it also in Yemen. The Houthis have not got the message, even though they got hammered by Israel and hammered by the United States in the year just gone. But they are resupplying and preparing to mount further aggression. And unless the Saudis get the message on that and realize there's no long-term peace with the Houthis, then
they
that
simply cannot stay out of it any longer. Mr. Melman, really in a sentence.
Well, I think that in the Middle East there are always never-ending problems and challenges, but I believe that 2026 will be a better year because there are a lot of, on one hand, challenges, but a lot of
optimism is no less contagious than COVID, and we will end it right here. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.